flu time, it's cold time, and so we're going to talk a little bit about flu. And Tracy, I'm especially excited that you're here because you've sort of been on the other side of the flu industry, and Dr. Stern's had some experience in that area as well as supplying flu vaccines. I tell you, when we first started, my background being in emergency medicine, I knew nothing about this whole how to order vaccines and how you do all this, and it's been I'm assuming if it was hard for us to understand, and we've just now got it down, it must be hard for some other people to understand too. So could you just kind of explain to someone who's starting their first urgent care, they've never ordered flu vaccines before, and they're trying to figure out what to do for next year, how would they go about that?
Well, typically everybody wants to get their flu vaccine in August. And if you have just started a clinic and you have your distribution companies that you deal with, obviously that's the first place you want to go. If you have just started the clinic, you might be a little bit behind the grade trying to get flu vaccine, but if you're trying to pre-book for the next season, my recommendation is at the time that you get your flu vaccine, order for the next year. So if you receive your flu vaccine in August or September, you should be talking to your distribution people about getting your flu vaccine for the next year. You typically cannot pre-book flu vaccine until January. Typically it waits till the following year. However, you can at least get your name on the list. You can't officially pre-book, you can't officially do contracts, but you can at least get your name on the list and start that pecking order. And the reason I say this is when January comes around, you're going to have tens of thousands of clinics trying to pre-book. And if you already have your name on that list and you wind up coming up short in a year, you're going to be in the area where you're going to be able to get flu vaccine.
Okay.
So.
And what has been your experience? How do you guys do this every year?
Well, I think the point of ordering early is important. If there is a shortage and it's rationed out, it doesn't matter when you order it, if you're in that year. But if there's a modest supply, that's a situation where you're really going to be, if you aren't pre-booked, you'll be lucky.
Right. And there's an additional caveat to that. If there is a shortage or there is limited quantities, getting a contract, and some distribution companies do contracts, some do not. If you have a limited amount of flu vaccine and you have a contract versus having just a pre-book, there is a binding contract. You're going to be the one that's going to get your flu vaccine versus the person that pre-booked. Right. So if you have that capability, I highly recommend doing that for a percentage of what you want.
Now, let me ask you, because this always gets confusing to me, isn't it true that if you do your pre-books, maybe I have this backwards, if you do your pre-books, they're less expensive than if you do your contracts, or is it the other way around, or how does that work?
And that varies, because it depends on which manufacturer is going to allow a contract. And I'll give you an example. This year the contract was through a company where they sold 18 years and up. Because it's 18 years and up, typically it's less expensive anyways because it doesn't cover as wide range of patient load. If you're doing a pre-book, depending on the age, whether it's a 6 months and up, 4 years and up, 18 and up, the broader the range, the more expensive typically. Okay. So that's really how it works. Now, however, you do have some negotiating power when you do contracts. It depends on when you contract, actually not when you contract, but what date you want to receive your flu vaccine. Mm-hmm. If you want it sooner, say you want it in September or October, you may pay a higher premium. If you're willing to wait and get yours a little bit later, then you might be able to negotiate.
So going back to the very basics, tell me what, I understand this obviously, but I'm sure there's some people who don't. What do you mean there's multiple vaccines?
Well, you have several manufacturers and every year it changes. Sometimes there's a new one that comes to market. Typically Sanofi Pasteur carries one that is 6 months and older. And then you have one that is the Fluvrin, which is 4 years and up, and then you have the Flulival, which is 18 years and up.
Okay. So if you have a clinic that doesn't see children per se,
right,
then you would order a different vaccine than if you have a clinic who's seeing mostly pediatrics.
Right.
Okay.
Right. Exactly. So and there's no reason to get it for 6 months and up and pay that premium if you're not if
you're going to use it for adults mostly.
Right.
Okay.
Exactly.
All right. So in our case, where we see both, we order some of each.
Right. Right, which was we don't see as many pediatrics, so we did a very small quantity there. But for the 18 and up, we did the majority of our vaccines,
okay,
and it worked out very well.
Okay, good. Dr. Stern, anything to add to that?
Well, on your expertise there, would you see a downside on contracts?
The only downside that I have ever seen on the contract is over contracting, over committing, and the only reason I say that is because I have seen the shortage years, and the shortage years at the time when I was on the other avenue, when I was in distribution, those were the only clients that got vaccine, and so it was to their benefit. Now, because of that, a lot of people went to the next year and really booked up on contracts, and then
there was plenty.
Right, and there's sometimes a penalty.
Yeah.
If the distribution company cannot provide, they actually pay a penalty back to the client, to the
really?
customer. Now, but that goes the other way. If you have overbooked and now you do not want it, because they order based on what their pre-books are. You know, they order in this stuff, and there's a lot of times they'll dump $1 million worth of vaccine down the drain because they've overcommitted. So they hold the customer accountable. So it goes both ways. So that's why I encouraged this year when we did ours, we were very cautious, but we did our homework, and we did it right. So you definitely need to know your patient load and what you think you're going to utilize.
And when you say we did our homework, what we essentially did was we went to all of our companies, all of our people who we normally supply their flu vaccines, and asked them ahead of time and sort of pre-booked them.
Absolutely.
Before we pre-booked ourselves.
And we did both.
Yeah.
We did a contract, and we also pre-booked with several different manufacturers.
Right.
So we had a little bit of cushion if we needed it.
Yeah.
When you talk about doing your homework, if I'm a brand new clinic starting up and I have never been through the flu season before, what would be an estimated percentage to prepare for?
And that's a good question. My suggestion is to contract very small. Very small. Kind of get, I'm sure you've done demographics in your area if you are a new clinic. So I would gauge it fairly low, but do those pre-books, because those pre-books, they're reserved for you, but you're not bound to them. When they call you and say, hey, we have your pre-book, do you want it? You have the luxury of saying yes or no.
Yeah, it's an interesting game, which honestly 5 years ago I didn't even know existed.
Right.
So, and you sort of have to learn to play the game, which is why I wanted to talk to it on here and have you here, and luckily have Dr.
Right.
Stern here, and kind of say, this is the way we do it. Once you're more established, you get a better idea of how many you're going to need each year.
Right.
But in the beginning, we had no idea.
Right.
We didn't know how many to order, and I remember ending up with, at the end of the year, a whole bunch sitting on our shelf that we'd paid for. I think every clinic's gone through that sooner or later.
Right.
Well, and don't forget, if you're a startup clinic, flu shot can be one of your best marketing techniques. There's nothing in sales like getting somebody into your store or
Right.
into your clinic.
And that's definitely one of the topics we need to touch on is marketing. A lot of people do the flu clinics, or they market to their big clientele, the big doc meds and stuff like that, and that is a big draw.
Yeah.
So that does.
There's
make
nothing like a banner on the street saying $5 flu shots.
Right. Right.
And we've done a lot of that, especially in clinics where we saw, it's limping along, we're not getting a lot of people in here. Getting banners out on the street saying $5 flu shots or even free flu shots makes a big difference.
And it's internal too. Your staff needs to be able to promote it and discuss it. That goes from the internal out.